Washington's butt was thoroughly kicked, not licked. Winter had arrived. His soldiers' morale was low. Some just packed up and left. Washington had to do something, anything, to bring back belief in the revolution. The British had spread all over New Jersey and settled in for a season of cider drinking and hardcore partying. Nobody expected a strike in the winter, so Washington began laying out plans for a strike in the winter. Obviously he did. He's George Washington. The British had brought in a big group of Hessian mercenaries from the German regions of Hesse-Cassel and Hesse-Cassel to battle the rebels. It was these mercs that were posted across the Delaware River from Washington and his troops, and more Hessian backups were arriving, but they took an unscheduled break because their leader got thirsty. No, not that kind of thirsty, that kind of thirsty. It was Christmas Eve with a snowstorm raging when Washington learned the Hessian Guard was weak and he made the call to strike. Again, it's George Washington. He made a dangerous crossing of the frozen Delaware River with 2,400 troops and hiked 9 miles to Trenton, where he caught the Hessian troops totally off guard. After a short but savage clash, the Hessians gave up in swarms. It was a much-needed win that sent a strong message, not just to the British, but to Americans, all across the colonies. The fight was far from over. General Cornwallis led the British Army south to hit back at the Americans, but in a string of battles, Washington's smart positioning and surprise flanks beat the British 3 times in 10 days. There's a mouthful of Murica for YA, and the British chose to ditch southern New Jersey for the rest of the season. Washington finally built a winter base in Morristown, but for the Americans, there was way less partying than the Brits. Elsewhere, the British had taken Newport, Rhode Island, since it made a solid naval base. In the South, they flopped in taking Charleston, South Carolina, which left loyalist Brits stranded and open to more harassment, even full-on exile. Congress sent Benjamin Franklin to France on a task to convince them to join the fight, and while the French usually loved any excuse to mess with the Brits, they didn't want to hop in unless it looked like a guaranteed win. Cowards. So for now, Franklin passed the time relaxing and chasing skirts. Come on, Ben. The British Parliament couldn't grasp why the war wasn't done yet, and the heat was on to finish it. So the British came up with a scheme. General Burgoyne up in Montreal and General William Howe in New York would push through the Hudson Valley and link up in the center, splitting the colonies in half, and wrecking the American communication flow. Burgoyne started moving south, and after snagging Fort Ticonderoga pretty easily, he then hit some heavy American pushback, so he sent Howe a ding-dong message, asking if he'd be showing up anytime soon. Meanwhile, Howe totally ditched the plan, and went full ego mode by seizing the American capital, Philadelphia. He beat Washington and his troops at Brandywine Creek, using the classic distract end and flank tactic, and Philly was now under British control, making Congress flee to York. Big oof. But Burgoyne was stranded, left to face the growing American army in Saratoga. American General Horatio Gates linked up with our old buddy Benedict Arnold to deal a final punch to Burgoyne's force. Arnold wanted to take the fight straight to the British, but Gates preferred waiting for them to come in. After a fiery argument, Gates, the senior commander, told Arnold to go to his quarters, but Arnold ignored the order, and at the Battle of Bemis Heights, he stormed the British and crushed them. Well done, Horatio. By the way, whatever happened to that other guy who was in Saratoga who, Benedict Arnold, doesn't ring a bell? Oof, so tragic. Alexa, play Despacito. Hey, George, didn't I do an awesome job capturing Philadelphia and everything? Didn't I? You're dismissed. Lol. Both Burgoyne and Howe went back to Great Britain, leaving British General Henry Clinton to handle the war. And the war was about to take a rough twist, because with the win at Saratoga, the French were finally ready to back the Americans. Alright, Benny, we're in. Hey, isn't this kinda ironic? You know, 'cause you're a republic trying to topple an absolute monarchy, and I'm an absolute monarchy helping you. Like, can you imagine if your revolution inspired my citizens to rise up against me, and then they locked up me and my whole family, and they chopped all our heads off? LOL. Stop talking, can you imagine? That's called foreshadowing. For now, in America, winter had arrived once again, which meant more sickness, more hunger, and even a sprinkle of mutiny. After losing Philadelphia, Washington's leadership was once again under threat. But suddenly, a Prussian dude with a super fancy name, recruited by Benjamin Franklin, showed up out of nowhere and said, "Hey, I'm here to give your troops some European-style training." And train them, he did. They learned to shoot properly, how to march in sync, where to go potty and where not to, and harsh punishments were given to anyone who didn't follow. Washington's army emerged from the winter in 1778, a fresh and tougher unit. ready to reclaim Philadelphia from the British. In the end, though, they didn't have to. With the French entering the war, the British told General Clinton to leave Philadelphia and pull all British troops together in New York. So Washington sent Benedict Arnold to resecure and lock down the city. As he followed the British through Jersey by land, eventually spotting a solid chance to strike at Monmouth Courthouse, the clash happened on a blistering hot summer day, and as many troops died from heat as from bullets. In the end, thanks to some useless borderline shady moves from Washington's second-in-command, it was a tie. And in this war, a tie kinda counts as a win for the Americans. Next up, meet this guy. This is John Paul Jones. John Paul Jones is dashing, Scottish, and completely unhinged. When the war kicked off, everyone was like, how do the colonies plan to take on the British Navy with their tiny fleet of converted cargo ships? Yeah, try telling that to John Paul Jones. This guy sailed to Britain's doorstep, somehow captured a British ship near Ireland, and hauled it back to France. Then he came back, attacking ships, raiding villages, and dodging capture like a pro. These are basically pirate tactics, but hey, if it works, it works. In one episode, he captured a British ship and returned to a Dutch harbor without an official flag, since his was lost mid-battle. That's a big no-no, and could get you busted as a pirate. The Dutch covered for him by quickly sketching a version based on Benjamin Franklin's notes on what the American flag should resemble, and they logged it into their records as an official US banner. What they designed looks pretty slick. The whole mission probably weighed heavily on British morale and sparked doubt in their ability to win the conflict. And, fun fact, he was so legendary that one of the towns he hit in 1778 gave him an official honorary apology in 1999. Keep shredding in heaven. John Paul Jones, you're a legend now. What the Continental Navy lacked in resources, though the French joining the war made up for. The French kicked off with sea skirmishes in the English Channel, and they sent a hefty fleet to America, although it took a ton of damage in a storm off Rhode Island. The Americans were hoping for a deeper commitment from the French, so John Adams sailed to France to assist Benjamin Franklin with negotiations. Oh sweet, you finally showed up. Check this out. Hey ladies, I'd like to fight. You like a kite, 'cause you're electric. Isn't this awesome? Is this what you've been doing? Yeah, why? We came here on a diplomatic mission to lock in military help from France, not to flirt with the locals. Wait, no, ladies, come back. Worst wingman ever. But the Americans would receive some more backup. The Dutch sent aid, though they never signed an official alliance. More importantly though, the Spanish, who had already been helping, officially jumped in the war in June 1779. They gave support in the Midwest and along the Gulf Coast, campaigns that seriously affected the Native American tribes in those spots. Both sides actually recruited the help of Native American tribes during the war, sometimes even turning those tribes against each other. In the summer of 1779, after multiple raids against the Americans by the Iroquois, Washington ordered an expedition that torched over 40 villages, forcing the tribes to flee to Canada under British protection. And another group that shouldn't be overlooked were African Americans, both enslaved and free. They fought on both sides of the war, hoping to secure their freedom, but later, many were just sent back into slavery, especially those who had fought for the Americans. Even though he owned slaves, Jefferson had written a statement against slavery in the Declaration of Independence, but afraid of upsetting the southern colonies, it was cut from the final version. For the same reason, the American Army stopped recruiting African American men in 1775. A rule that Washington, a slaveholder himself, supported, but they had to flip the policy after the British promised freedom to any slaves who joined them. Generally, you had a better shot at freedom if you sided with the British. However, even those who left with the British after the war faced harsh treatment and racism in their new homes outside America. Our old pal Benedict Arnold is now running Philadelphia, having a great time partying it up with, and even marrying someone from the Philadelphia elite. The same elite that had partied with the British when they ruled the city, and suddenly the people of Philly, including the state governor, began accusing Arnold of having pro-British vibes. To calm everyone down, Washington wrote a note criticizing Arnold, calling his behavior reckless and inappropriate, and that was too many burns for Benedict Arnold to take. He asked Washington to assign him command of the fort at West Point. Our old buddy Benedict Arnold is our old buddy no more. Thankfully, the traitorous plans were uncovered on a captured British messenger, but Arnold slipped away before he could be arrested. As a British brigadier general, he later led assaults on American towns, most notably his raid on Richmond, Virginia in 1781. His betrayal rattled George Washington, who had once again set up base at Morristown. His leadership somehow kept the Continental Army together during the harshest winter of the war. We're heading into 1780, and Parliament was losing its mind that the war still wasn't done. The British debt was climbing, and despite grabbing parts of Massachusetts in late 1779, the North was stuck in a stalemate. So the British decided to pull a major shift in strategy toward the South, a money-making region with more public backing. For the British, or at least, that's what they believed. A year earlier, they had taken the poorly defended city of Savannah, Georgia, with ease, and a combined American-French counterattack failed. Now, they surrounded Charleston, South Carolina. It collapsed within months, with thousands of American soldiers giving up to the British a brutal loss. The British quickly swept in to take over, and they sent walking Hollywood villain with a British accent Bannister the Butcher Tarleton into the backwoods, where he chased rebels and crushed them with savage violence. The British presence also sparked local loyalist militias in the region to rise against their tormentors. The British really seemed to have cracked the code with their southern strategy, and now the ball was totally in Washington's court. I'm sending my most trusted general, Nathaniel Greene, down south to shut the British down. Gonna stop you there, George. We're sending Hero of Saratoga and your top rival, Horatio Gates. Check it out, George. I'm gonna rescue the day again. Everybody will cheer, and I'm gonna steal your job. Here I go. And he fought one battle with Cornwallis, got obliterated, and ran for it. Welp, let's go with your guy. Nathaniel Greene knew the British outmatched his troops, and couldn't be beaten using standard tactics. So he had to switch things up. He broke his army into two, shouted, "Hey, big guy, look over here," and then they darted off in separate directions. Cornwallis sent Tarleton to chase Morgan, and he caught up with him at Cowpens, where Morgan absolutely wrecked Tarleton. Then the two started dragging Cornwallis on a wild goose chase through North Carolina. His larger and better force, much bulkier and slower than Greene's nimble, mobile army. Greene lured Cornwallis farther and farther from his supply lines, then crossed the Don River into Virginia, gathered some backup troops, and spun back around to confront the now worn-down British at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. Both armies clashed in savage hand-to-hand combat. Cornwallis, scared of losing, blasted his cannons into the messy brawl, hitting a bunch of his own men. Greene pulled back, giving Cornwallis the technical win, but Cornwallis lost a fourth of his forces in the battle, so it felt way more like a British disaster. By now, both sides were desperate for something to finally end the madness. The British were bleeding cash, while the Americans were once again dealing with mutinies, as their soldiers went unpaid and lacked even the basic stuff they needed to survive. Luckily, the French were now arriving in larger forces and were ready to throw down. After his clash with Greene, Cornwallis figured the only way to win the South was to first stop the Southern Continental Army from using Virginia as a supply point. So he ditched the Carolinas, moving through Wilmington and over to Yorktown, a spot the British assumed would be simple to supply and defend. On his march to Yorktown, he hit up many farms, grabbing horses and goods from the locals, but also freeing thousands of enslaved people, many of whom followed him. The French viewed Cornwallis' fresh position as a chance to land a major hit on the British. Washington wanted to hit Clinton in New York, but the French said it was a super dumb plan, and, to be fair, they were right. Instead, Washington sent out fake letters to make it seem like they were going to attack Clinton, but secretly their joint army marched straight down to Virginia. A massive French fleet under the command of Comte de Grasse showed up and managed to push the British Navy out of the Chesapeake Bay. The United Land and Sea Forces then trapped Cornwallis troops in Yorktown. The American and French forces closed in around the town, pounding artillery onto Cornwallis, who frantically begged Clinton for support. But Clinton was weirdly chill about the whole crisis. Cornwallis held on for nearly a month before he had no option left but to surrender. Over 7,000 British troops were taken, a massive loss, and with that, Parliament had reached its limit. The war just wasn't worth it, and it had to end now. The British still controlled New York, Charleston, and Savannah, but battles between both sides mostly stopped as peace talks kicked off in Paris. The final treaty in 1783 made Great Britain pull out its troops from U.S. territory, recognize U.S. freedom, and hand over land reaching to the Mississippi River. In exchange, the Americans agreed to repay any debt still owed to Britain, and promised decent treatment to colonists loyal to the crown. The Spanish got Florida, while the French got a money crisis that triggered their own revolution a decade later. Best prize ever. Washington stepped back to his estate at Mount Vernon, saying goodbye to his troops by saying, "I most devoutly wish that your latter days may be as prosperous and happy as your former ones have been glorious and honorable." He hoped to spend the rest of his life peacefully, but sadly for him, a whole bunch of people wanted him to lead the new nation. And by a bunch of people, I mean literally everyone. The first U.S. election was pretty much a grassroots campaign to convince Washington to accept the job. He took the oath on April 30th, 1789, and he personally laid out many of the guidelines and limits for future American leaders. First of all, there was talk over what he should be called. Is he a king? Is he our supreme ruler? In the end, they picked a word that, at the time, was fairly humble: president. Like the president of your local chess club or cupcake fundraiser. He created a team of expert advisors, knowing that no leader could know it all, no matter how much of a stable genius they thought they were. He pushed important bills to Congress, and gave a yearly State of the Union speech to keep his own authority balanced. He also said that the U.S. should stay neutral in foreign wars, and in the end, he willingly gave up his authority after just 2 terms. He could have turned the presidency into anything he imagined, but his thoughtful and measured decisions helped set the example of an office that is strong in its boundaries, influential through its negotiation, and admired in its modesty. And so the United States came to be, and everything was flawless. It had 0 issues, not even one. Definitely nothing that would, I don't know, spark such a wild division that it would lead to a civil war. Anyway, moving forward, quick question. Name the most American thing that pops into your head. Baseball, bald eagles. That orange guy who wanted to build a massive wall, calling the champ of an American-only tournament world champions, checks out. Or maybe numbers and experiments. Wait, numbers and experiments. That's right. If you didn't already know, science is as American as mixing chicken with syrupy waffles. And don't just believe me, go ask Thomas Jefferson. Of course, to do that, you'd need a time portal, and that would involve some math and a bit of science. If you truly want to grasp math and science, like calculating the age of everything, diving into special relativity, or just testing your brain with some quirky logic games, then you've seriously got to explore Brilliant. Brilliant walks you through a wide range of awesome topics by simplifying them and getting you to actually tackle problems in a journey that is hands-on, addictive, and super easy to grasp. This clever approach makes it perfect for students, experts, and curious folks all across the world.